Hi there. Does the change in my screen mean we're ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready when you all are.
All right, I think so. Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the WashU Alumni Association Discover the West Coast series. Today, we here in Seattle, I guess, are being discovered. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about coffee. We've got Sam Spillman here, who is the Director of Coffee and Caffe Experience for Caffe Vita, but more importantly, she also, no big deal, just happens to be the 2019 US Barista Champion. So we will for sure be asking her a little more about that coming up. We might also have Caffe Vita owner Deming McLeese popping by. We are not exactly sure, so get excited for some unknowns. But I guess to start off, my name's Alicia Vermillion. I am the editor-in-chief of Seattle Met Magazine. We're the city magazine here in Seattle. I started 10 years ago as the food and drink editor, but more germane to this conversation, I am a WashU alum, class of 2001, which I realized as I was getting ready today is 20 years ago, which is wild. To put it in coffee chronology, when I showed up from the Pacific Northwest to St. Louis, I was really surprised to find that Starbucks had not yet made its way to Missouri. Now, obviously, Starbucks is everywhere. So that's why I'm actually really excited to talk about a different facet of Seattle coffee culture, specifically Caffe Vita. I mean, I think it's hard to find another roaster or coffee company that's more intertwined with Seattle's like culture and food and drink culture specifically. Gosh, started in 1995. I feel like there should be a Mudhoney soundtrack playing in the background when I talk about Caffe Vita. But Sam, am I correct? It's the largest independently owned roaster in the country still?
I don't know. I something like that. I think maybe for sure in Seattle.
Yeah.
But
last time I think
yeah, I just focused on making the coffee taste
that
good.
is true. That is true. Last time I did a longer story on Vita a number of years ago, and that was the case. We pour it, I mean, Seattle obviously has tons of great coffee, but Vita is what we pour. It's poured on the ferries, it's poured at the zoo, it's poured in dive bars when dive bars are a thing. But it also is, I think, again, last time I checked was all 50 states. It's available. It really, I think, has done, a great job of growing while also retaining sort of its Seattle-y essence. But yeah, so that's why I guess I'm really excited to have you here, Sam. Sam's going to be demoing a pour over for us. I'm excited, actually. My biggest COVID, not my biggest, but one of the big changes of COVID in my household is now we make our own coffee every morning instead of procuring it. So this is definitely relevant to my interests. So Sam, will you tell us a little bit about sort of your background and how you got to have the cool job title you have today?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Spillman. Like Alicia said, I'm the director of coffee and Caffe experience for Caffe Vita. And it's funny, we were having a conversation right before this call and just realizing I've been in coffee since for the past 10 years. And when I first started in coffee, I never really thought that I could make a career out of it or that there was that opportunity within. And when I started in coffee, I just became so passionate about the idea of how coffee brought people together. As soon as I moved to Seattle I grew up in Idaho, I moved to Seattle and I started working for a coffee company in Seattle and was actually trained how to make coffee properly. And that changed my world. That's when I realized, wow, not only does this thing bring people together, but there's a lot of science and intention that goes into it behind the scenes. About that time, I was getting into barista competitions. And that became, I'm like, if there's one thing you learn about me during this entire class is I'm super competitive. I turn everything into a competition. And it's really like, we'll be carrying groceries in and my husband will grab 1 bag or 2 bags and I'll grab 4 just to like show that I can do more. So I competed for about 5 years and then I won in 2019. And that was like the top experience. That was my career goal. I never thought it was actually going to happen. And when that happened, I was like, dang, what's next? Like, what else is there to do? I want to continue to grow in coffee, but I don't know what direction to go in. And that's when Deming and Tom, who is our COO, Tom is, at Caffe Vita, they approached me and they're like, hey, we have this position open and you would be the perfect candidate for it. Now, little context to that is Deming and Tom, Deming took new ownership of Caffe Vita about a year ago, exactly, a little over a year ago. And he has completely changed the trajectory of what this company is going to be. Like Alicia was saying, we've been around for 25 years. So we've been around the block. Like we've seen how coffee's changed over the years. And our goal is to change with the growth of coffee, because coffee keeps getting better and better. Experiences keep getting better and better. And our whole focus is to grow with that and offer our guests and people around the country like yourselves an opportunity to experience great coffee and a great atmosphere. And that's our whole goal. That's Deming's whole goal is, yeah, we want to make great coffee, but more than that, we want to make sure it's being shared. So I'm super excited about this.
And I have so many follow-up questions for you now, but I will say that I was laughing earlier. Deming has been around for quite a while too, even though he's pretty new to Caffe Vita. I was looking something up recently and I saw him quoted in an article in the Chicago Tribune in 1995 explaining what a half calf was. So very much part of the origin story. And then, yeah, I know you guys have some, sort of big changes as the industry changes, which I want to ask you about. But first of all, I feel like we can't go past the Barista Championship discussion without me asking more about what exactly you do in something like that, because I feel like my first inclination is I think that you're making like elaborate latte art. And I know that is absolutely nothing to do with what actually happens in those competitions.
Yeah, so the Barista, every year there's a set of competitions. There's Barista, there's Brewers Cup, which is pour overs, what we're going to be doing today. There's Cup Tasters, which is a tasting competition. There's Coffee and Good Spirits, which is coffee cocktails essentially. And there's roasting competition. Now the Barista, it takes like the main stage. Like that one is a 15-minute presentation. You're serving 4 espressos, 4 milk beverages, and 4 signature beverages that you create to 4 judges who are tasting. You have 3 judges following you around in your face, checking out all your technicals.
It sounds terrifying.
It's so terrifying. The first time I competed, I was a nervous wreck. I said a curse word over the mic, lost some points for that. I went over time. I was just happy to have survived the experience, honestly. And it was a great learning experience. So the cool thing about the competition is you choose the coffee that you're going to be working with, and you're presenting this coffee, and 50% of your score is how well you describe how that coffee tastes. So it's a pretty intense experience because we all know that everybody's taste buds are a little bit different. Everybody's experience of flavors is a little bit different. So being able to explain a coffee to the judges and them get those flavors that you're describing can be pretty challenging, especially when coffee is changing every day that it's off-gassing from being roasted.
So sort of speaking of explaining, I'm curious where you would put Vita in the pantheon and like the spectrum from there's the really like acidic, hip new wave. I say hip new wave, that was like 3 years ago. I'm sure it's absolutely not the new wave, down to like the darkest, like Italian style roast, which is kind of historically where I think Vita lives, a little more toward that end of things. But I'm curious, I guess, for someone who's not a barista, how, where you would place, Vita on that spectrum.
Yeah, so Vita, like I said, our goal, traditionally Vita has been a very like dark roast, medium roast company. What our focus is broadening what coffees we can offer on the roast spectrum. So there's something for everybody. So I personally get excited about light, bright, poppy acidity, whereas like my friend who likes more of those chocolatey, caramely coffees. So we have something all along the spectrum. I just started, when I came on board last May, I created a single origin program where we're launching micro lots and small farm coffees as more lighter roasts to highlight the qualities of the coffee and the acidity in the coffee, while still pouring into our dark roast blends like our Sumatra or our French roast, and making sure that the quality of the ingredients of those are continuing to get better while the roast profile is maintaining that little more like darker roast. So to answer your question, we have something all along the spectrum.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Well, maybe it makes sense to kind of get started demoing, and we can do more questions along the way. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that sounds great.
I was curious why, of all, of all the things to do, why a pour over was the thing that, made sense to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing is I wanted you guys to be able to leave with something that you can use. We've done like cuppings in the past where we just send you ground coffee and taste, and that's all fun and well, but I wanted you to be able to take something with you that you could actually use. And then the second thing is we just launched these pour overs. They're called Pourigamis. And what's really fun about them is they have the Vita logo on them. And then they have, this is our signature series. So it has my signature on it. Which feels a little weird, but it has my signature on it. So
You've arrived.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah.
Now, is that your actual signature, or did you come up with a different one so no one will take this and steal your identity?
This is not my actual signature. Is a lot sloppier than this. I cleaned it up a lot just so it looked a little prettier on pour over.
Sorry, I digress. Please continue.
Yeah. So today we're going to be using the Pourigami. When you open up your Pourigami, there's this little card that has some information about it. There's a QR code. If you leave this class and you're like, man, I didn't catch everything, then make sure to scan that QR code, and it will take you to Mir, the company who created the Pourigami. It will take you to their blog. So there'll be some instructions and videos that we work together on and creating. If you are planning on doing this as like during the class, go ahead and start getting some water heated up if you haven't already. We're gonna need hot water. You want your water to be about 195 to 205 degrees. So a good trick for that, if you don't have a thermometer, is bring your water to a boil and let it cool for about a minute and a half, and that will put you in the zone for brewing. So typically when we're talking about brewing, usually I use a scale just because that gives you more accurate measurements. When you're going by the volume of things, it's really hard to get consistent measurements. So if you're using a scale, we'd use a 1:16 ratio. Now, today I have actually gone by volumetrics because I want to make sure that even if you don't have a scale, you're able to brew a really good cup of coffee. So I have 3 tablespoons of ground coffee in this cup here that we're going to be brewing with. So go ahead and grab a tablespoon so you have it ready to measure out your coffee. You don't need to measure it out quite yet. So first thing you're going to do, this can be a little tricky. So I want you to grab these 2 pieces, and they hook together just like so. So like this little piece right here, this little claw hooks into that little slit in the metal right there. And then you'll grab your 3rd piece, and this little claw is always going to hook on top. So we'll hook that there, and then to close it up at the end, you'll grab these 2 pieces and then just shove it through. A lot of people try to like hook it above. It won't work. You just want to slide it right through there and hook it down.
This is wild.
Yeah, and it looks pretty cool once it's all together. It can be like the first time especially, it can be a little awkward to put together, but once you get it down, it's pretty easy. This is nice because you'll be able to take this camping. If we're ever able to travel again, to take it traveling with you. So it's pretty easy to use.
By the way, we are getting some questions in the Q&A. So do you want to let me know when we reach a good pausing or a good point to entertain some of those?
Yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and do that now.
Okay. Actually, we had one that I thought was great. That's like sort of a pretty straightforward question. But if you are making more coffee at home and you are at the store or online trying to find you know, like how do you figure out what is a good roast or what is a good coffee to buy if you're just kind of browsing what's out there?
Yeah, so I would say a good rule of thumb is stay away from any coffees that are oily. Those coffees have been roasted so much to the point that the oils in the coffee, this like cellular structure of the coffee has broken down. So the oils have secreted the coffee and the oils pull all the flavor. So by the time you grind it, you lose all that flavor. So if you want a really flavorful coffee, try to find one that is not like super oily.
And how do I figure that out?
Just
Like,
by
how do you
looking
tell
at
what's
the beans, like you'll see visual oil on it. You can also, it's hard when you're at the grocery store, but I would like look around at the cafes around you. And always ask your local barista too, because I guarantee most baristas are like looking to tell you more about the coffee. Another thing is check the roast date on the coffee. Coffee should never be more than.
Okay.
What was that?
Oh, no, thank you. I see we have Deming here. Hello, Deming.
Oh, perfect.
Hello. I just took a mental lesson in my head on Central Time versus Pacific Time. I've been working with people on Mountain Time for so long that I thought it was only 1 hour early.
I thought
So my
you just
apologies.
wanted
I've just
to
been
avoid
sitting here.
me asking you to
No.
tell stories from the 90s. Well, Sam is
No, I've just been, oh my gosh, I've just been sitting here in the office, you know, doing other stuff. I was totally available. So my sincere apologies for my math skills and time zone skills.
Sam is rocking her way through a pour over demo with what, wait, remind me,
Awesome.
what is this amazing contraption called again?
Origami.
Origami. I knew it was a portmanteau. Awesome. Well, do you want me to grab another question or do you want to continue on, Sam?
Let's continue on, and then as we're pouring, we can answer a ton more questions.
Okay. Ooh, we have a question about whether you've used this to brew coffee on a plane, though that would require having been on a plane recently.
You could totally use this on a plane.
Ah, that's some smart.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
You would have to get creative, but you could do it.
I feel like weirder things have happened on a plane.
If you do it, please take a photo, tag me in it. I want to see it.
Well, this is actually a question maybe for Deming just as much as Sam, but this is another good one is like, how do you introduce people to the world of coffee, i.e. educating people of options beyond medium drip without intimidating customers? And also how does Vita stay engaged with current customers in addition to reaching out to new people trying to learn coffee? I feel like that's a great question. I had to read it verbatim.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like the biggest thing that I focus on is like meeting people where they're at in their coffee journey. So like you can tell a lot as a barista when you're making so many drinks for people, you can tell a lot about a person by their drink order. So if someone is ordering like a caramel macchiato, I'm not going to throw a straight espresso at them right away and be like, hey, try this. I'm going to try to challenge them to try different things that fall in the realm of that and kind of stretch their experience outside of their traditional drink. But like I said, it's just meeting people where they're at and inviting them into new spaces with coffee. And but it's really hard because like I don't want someone that I've never met before to come in and then feel judged by me being like, hey, why do you drink this? So I try to start that relationship and start building a relationship. So then it makes it a little easier to be like, hey, do you want to try something new? Let me make you something. And start that conversation. It's really about how you communicate everything too. Like I'm not going to use any words that are like just hard to understand. Like you can take really complex concepts and simplify how you explain them so anybody can understand them.
Yeah.
And Denny, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Well, it's always fun to tell people a little bit more about coffee who don't really know many of the aspects of it. Like even just comparing espresso to coffee, a lot of people have the perception that espresso has so much more caffeine and really amps you up, but it's really actually the opposite. Drip coffee actually has more caffeine than espresso. And part of the idea of espresso is you're using high pressure to push all those coffee oils in one fell swoop, and you get like a different flavor profile from the beans than you do, say, with a pour over or drip. And they all are very valid forms of coffee and valid ways of drinking coffee, and everyone has their preference. But it's just fun to educate people in that kind of way. And with coffee notes and all those things, I mean, it's a constant learning process, even for me being in it this long and working with Sam and the team here. I've actually learned more and more this year than I expected to, and it's really exciting because it's such a deep subject. And it's a daily ritual for so many people, so it's really fun to learn about it, and usually really fun for most people to learn about it because so many people, you know, start their day that way. And so yeah, like Sam said, I hate to make anyone feel like, you know, they don't know enough or something. I really just want to make it fun and educate people in a way that makes sense to, you know, like Sam said, meet them where they're at and then go from there, for sure. My dad's entry drink to the coffee world was a mocha. He hated coffee before, but you put a little chocolate and some milk on there and some whipped cream. It's like, oh, okay, now then he likes coffee, and now he's on to, you know, years later he's an Americano drinker. You know, so he just likes the pure taste of the actual coffee. Everything else is just kind of set aside. So I think it's like anything else. The deeper you get into it, the more interested you get in the notes and the profiles. And it's a deep subject, so it's really fun to talk to people about it for sure.
Well, Sam, maybe I should let you continue because I'm getting a few questions about whether you can brew straight into the travel mug. So that makes me think we should not deny people the knowledge of how to do this any longer.
Yeah, for sure. So let's hold the travel mug to the side because we're actually going to be putting our hot water in there to use that as our vessel to pour water from. This is just a little trick that you can use at home or camping, and it works really, really well. So if you have a separate cup that you can pour into that's at least 12 ounces of size, I would grab that. And this can sit on top of anything, really. So go ahead and grab that. Now, before you insert your filter, you'll see this filter, and you'll see this riveted side right here. Go ahead and fold on that side, making sure to crease it, and then you can open up your filter. Now, when you set it into the porigami, because the porigami is triangular shaped and this is round, it can be a little hard to like get it set in there. So I hold it down until I add my coffee into there. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my coffee into the porigami. Now, what's really important from this point is to make sure your coffee bed is level, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna add water so the grounds are submerged in the hot water, but the water's gonna slowly sink down and drip into our vessel. And so it's important to have an even bed of coffee so all the coffee gets the same amount of contact time. Water's super lazy, so it's gonna try to find these easy pathways to get through. So by having an even bed, it's gonna make it so all the water has to go through all the coffee at the same amount of time. So I just give it a little shake.
About that making a difference. That is such a good tip.
Yeah. And it should, I don't know if you can see in there, but it should be pretty level in there. Give it a little shake. Don't shake it too much. Don't like throw coffee everywhere. If you shake it too much, the finer grounds will sink to the bottom and it affects how your coffee brews. So you guys all received a Vita tumbler that is 12 ounces in size. So we're gonna fill this with hot water just till the lip right here, leaving about half an inch from the very top. So when you're all ready, we'll go ahead and do that. Again, your water should be between 195 degrees and 205 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and transfer the water. Again, this is a very I'm trying to create the most simplified version so anybody can brew this with what they have at home. But feel free, I know Alicia's going to throw my Instagram handle into the chat box. Feel free to reach out through Instagram or ask any questions now for more questions on how to like incorporate a scale or take it to the next level. So once we have the water in the tumbler, put that lid back on so it doesn't leak. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by adding just enough water to wet all the grounds, just the least amount of water we can use to wet all the grounds. Those coffee grounds have a ton of gases inside, believe it or not. So we want to wet the coffee so it allows the coffee grounds to release those gases. And that way, when we do our actual pour, the water is able to actually create contact with the coffee and not have gas interfering. This is called a bloom. So you'll actually see when you pour a little bit of water on, you'll see the coffee start to bubble. And that's the gas that's being released from the coffee. We're essentially trying to saturate the grounds. So when we do add our water, the water is able to travel into the grounds and pull flavor out. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. And you'll pour with the thermos. It's a little harder to control your flow. So you'll pour a little aggressively at first, and that's okay. Just make sure everything is saturated. So I'm gonna let this sit just for about 15, 25 seconds, just while it off gases. Now the next pour I do, I'm gonna bring the water to the top of the origami, but not go any further above that. Add some more. Perfect. Now I'm going to let it sit and brew.
There's someone asking whether you want to wet the filter prior to putting in the grounds.
Yeah, if you have a gooseneck kettle, I would definitely wet your filter because that will remove the potential of any paper flavor getting into your coffee. It's a little harder to do with this thermos, especially when you're camping and you have a limited amount of hot water. So I'm working on that very minimalist level. But if you have a gooseneck kettle, I would wet the filter, and I would start by keeping the tip of the gooseneck kettle close to the line of the filter so it doesn't drip off to the side. And the water just attaches to the filter and soaks it. The more water it is going to clear out. It's just going to clear out all that paper flavor that could potentially get into your cup of coffee. And again, this is a very minimalist way that I'm showing you to brew this. Just so you know, like I feel like it's more of a skill to be able to like take this anywhere and make a really good cup of coffee. And this will do exactly that. There's ways that you can elevate it. So when you're brewing with using a scale, using that 1:16 ratio of coffee to water instead of using volume amounts, and also weighing your water as you go. So for the bloom, like if you're put like 2 or 3 tablespoons is about 20 grams of coffee. So that's 320 grams of water. So what I would do if I was using a scale is I would put my 20 grams of coffee in. I would add 40 grams of water for my bloom. So double the weight of the coffee, let it bloom. And then using a gooseneck kettle, I would move in a spiral motion, just making sure all the coffee gets hit with water. And I would do about 100 grams of water to bring it to the surface of the origami. Let it settle, let it saturate, let it go down. Don't let the grounds become exposed. And then before the grounds are exposed, add your last 120 grams or 100 grams, 80 grams. I can do math, I promise. 80 grams, and that will bring it back up to the rim of the origami, and it will slowly saturate. And that should give you a true extraction. This is why I love doing this ratio with the volume. It's 3 tablespoons with 12 ounces of water. is because the 12 ounces of water hits perfectly to do 2 even pours in addition to your balloon. So it's very consistent. You're not overfilling your origami, but there's enough coffee in there that you're able to get an even extraction. Does that make sense?
So I have to say, as an English major, the whole ratio versus volume thing was a huge light bulb for me. And if someone had explained that to me years ago, I'd be like so much farther down the road on being a coffee expert.
Yeah, as soon as I started learning more about like using weight versus volume with coffee, it changed how I baked. I'm not a huge baker. A lot of the time things just don't work out for me. I follow all the instructions and then it comes out and I'm like, this is horrible. But I started incorporating weights instead of volumes for like the amount of flour I use or whatever the ingredient is. And that changed everything. And it's like, it makes sense. Like coffee was right by incorporating scales. And the thing with coffee is it is so finicky as far as how it's brewed. When we're talking about coffee, so I want to give you a little more context to what we're dealing with here. Like coffee is an agricultural product. It is a seed of a coffee cherry that is grown between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. And it goes through all these steps to get the fruit removed off the seed. And through that process, so much flavor is left to the seed. And so with that, our goal is to try to maximize the flavor that we're pulling from the coffee. Coffee dissolves in 3 stages: sour, sweet to bitter. So it's really easy to make coffee taste bad. That happens more often than not. Making a coffee taste sweet and balanced is the bigger challenge here. So when we are talking about all this flavor that coffee has, all that flavor comes from the intentionality of a farmer really following all these little detailed steps to ensure quality. Like I said, it's an agricultural product, so there's a lot of opportunity for it to mold, to go bad, to have any defects, and to put the intentionality behind it so that doesn't happen is super hard to do. So farmers have their work cut out for them, and at the same time are getting paid such a low amount of money. But it is our job, I feel like it's the least we can do, is to pay attention to the details of the coffee to really maximize the flavor that we're able to pull from it.
And actually, speaking of details, Sam, sorry to interrupt. I had a couple people ask you to repeat. I had a few people ask you to repeat the ratios just to make sure they're getting those numbers right.
Yeah, so 3 tablespoons of coffee, 12 ounces of water if you're using volume. This thermos is a 12-ounce thermos, so fill it to just about the top. If you're using weights, you want to use a 1:16 ratio. So my ratio for home and the origami, or if I'm using a smaller pour over like so, I use 20 grams of coffee and 320 grams of water. And for grind size, with the origami, you do want to grind a little coarser. Your coffee came pre-ground, so that makes it a little easier. But as you go navigate and try new coffees, you want to grind a little coarser because the corners make it a little, slow down your pour a little bit. So you need a coarser ground so water can run through a little faster to compensate. If you think of coffee grounds as like sand versus rocks, water goes through sand a lot slower than rocks. So if we went a little coarser with our grind size, I want to say like sea salt, like just grainy sea salt. That's about the grind size we want. Whereas like if we're doing a V60 or using a different pour over, we would want a slightly finer grind size, like paper filter grind size. But this will complement that ratio of 1:16, 20 grams in, 320 grams out. You can use a little more coffee to get a little more coffee out if you want, but don't overdo it. I wouldn't go more than 22 grams in this origami, and I wouldn't go any less than 18 grams. So keep it in that range, and whatever grammage you're using, let's say you grind, you're grinding your own coffee and you grind 20 grams, but only 19.5 grams come out. That's totally fine. don't hassle with getting another half gram. Just multiply 19.5 by 16, and that will give you the amount of water you want to use.
You should have included a calculator in your kit.
I know, seriously. It's funny, I use the same like weights and ratios, but I still have to calculate it every time. Awesome. Any other questions about that?
So many others. Hold on. Let me know.
Go my way.
We did have a lot about grind size. So that was actually great. And someone was asking if you could sort of run through pour over versus French press.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the difference between the two.
Yeah, so French press is a full immersion brew. What that means is the water and the coffee sit together for a period of time. So when we talk about coffee dissolving in 3 stages, sour, sweet to bitter, our goal is to highlight as much sweetness and balance in the coffee as possible. So with the French press, what you have to be careful of is when you press those grounds down after the brew time comes like at 4.5 minutes or 5 minutes, those grounds are still sitting in the coffee, the brewed coffee. So it's continuing to extract. So if you notice when you drink a French press towards the end, when you're having that final cup, it tends to be really, really bitter. That's because it's been over extracted. Too much coffee has been dissolved and put you into that bitter range. So if you're using a French press, make sure once you push it down to transfer all the brewed coffee to another carafe to separate those grounds out. The difference with a pour over like the porigami is that you're adding water, but it only is in contact with the coffee syrup for a certain amount of time. So it takes a little more intentionality as far as how you're pouring to make sure all the coffee gets the same contact time. And also the speed that you're pouring with. That's where the thermos is not the most ideal way to pour, because the spout, it's really hard to control that stream of water. Whereas with this kettle, I can like make it as tiny of a stream as I want to, or as aggressive as I want to. So with that said, it gives you a little more control to be a little more intentional with how the water is hitting the coffee. Not saying French presses are bad, they're great pour overs, but make sure to separate the brewed coffee from the grounds at the end.
And is there anything to know about buying a particular type of filter?
Yeah, so you want the cone-shaped filter. This is the pointed end. They also sell like flat bottom filters that cut off like at this point here. Stay away from those because they'll just bunch up when you try to put it into the porigami. But you want this cone filter here.
So cone tip is the relevant part of that equation rather than.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny, I own a gooseneck kettle and never really knew specifically how precision it is until now. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What other questions do we have?
Let's see. Definitely some good ones for you and Deming that are more macro when this is done. I'm trying to look through any tips on using an Aeropress.
Ooh, Aeropress. I mean, the Aeropress is cool because it's like a full immersion, but it gives you a lot cleaner of a cup, less gritty than the French press. The filter is a little finer, so it catches a lot more of that sediment. I wouldn't use any more than like 19 grams of coffee in the Aeropress. I would use 18 or less. And when you do it, just make sure that you use the wand that they give you to stir the coffee in the water, and only do it 3 times just to break up any clumps. If you do it more than that, it becomes a form of agitation, which forces the water to extract more coffee. So you risk over extracting your coffee. So keep it to 3, but make sure to stir that coffee in water to break up any clumps. So all the coffee is getting the same amount of water contact.
Tim, do you have a preferred brewing method, or is that like asking what kid you love the most?
Yeah, I don't know. I love them for different reasons. The one I use at home is V60. It's just like a cone-shaped pour over. I keep my porigami for like when I'm traveling or camping. I mean, you guys see, like, it comes in this little packet, so you can just keep it in your back pocket. So that's like my on the go pour over. But when I'm at home, I use a V60. And honestly, I think it's partially barista competition, but espresso is my jam. So I have an espresso machine at home that I brew espresso on almost every day. And a V60 is like my weekend jam. That's what I do on Sundays and Saturdays and Sundays in the morning time.
Cool. Well, do you need to continue on? I feel like I want to save the sort of big picture questions for once you can fully focus.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. So we can remove this over here, throw the filter out, and then you can just pull the origami apart. I like coffee when, before drinking it, I like it to cool down a little bit. So much of your perception of the flavor changes when the coffee is cooler. When it's super hot, it's really hard to perceive the flavor that's present in the coffee. So give it a good stir. There's some components in coffee and brewed coffee that are more dense than others. So we want to make sure to stir to make sure, like if you have a spoon or just give it a good spin in your carafe, and then taste the coffee. And this is what I love about this whole process. Like if I'm on the go, is pouring. I use my thermos for the hot water, which heats up my thermos, and then I can pour my coffee in here, and it's ready to drink. And then I can take it wherever. I'm really looking forward to get those photos of whoever commented this, but of someone brewing this on an airplane. I think we should create the challenge. Super excited to see that. Awesome, and then you can enjoy the coffee. With this coffee, it should be very balanced. You should get like chocolatey flavors. If you like to add cream to your coffee, I would challenge you to try it without, and then add your cream. Just so you can see what you're working with before you add the cream. Because some coffees are going to require a little more cream to cut through the bitterness, and some just need a little bit to soften it up a little bit. And others just taste great by themselves. And it's preference. I'm not judging you. If you add like half cream, half coffee, that's you. Go for it. That's all you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Now that hopefully people have a cup of coffee in their hands, a cup of excellently brewed coffee, I would love to ask you and Deming some of these great sort of bigger picture questions that folks submitted. One of which just being like, talk a bit about your sourcing.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you want to know about the sourcing? There's so many components to it. So when we are sourcing coffee, it's relational. It's really easy to get so focused on money because a lot of the time you're buying large amounts of coffee at a time. So it gets expensive, but it's really easy to get focused on like the business side of things. But at the end of the day, it's something that we really value and we are focused on is building relationships for the long run. Like I was saying before, farmers are paid the least amount of money out of anybody in the coffee industry and the supply chain. So the more that we can balance that out and create a more sustainable future for farmers by paying them more for their coffee, that's our goal. Now with that, we're looking for coffees that meet the quality that we need for our blends too. We're constantly assessing our coffees and tasting them and how they operate in our blends and how we could better those ingredients to make our blends better. So it's really like when I go in and I'm looking at different samples, I'm really looking at, okay, does the price complement the quality of the coffee, one? And then what relationship can we foster out of this? With buying green, it's not like green coffee, which is unroasted coffee. It's not like I get a catalog and I just go through and pick the coffee I want and it's here next week. It's not like Amazon Prime. It'd be really convenient if it was, but it's not that way at all. Sometimes we're buying coffees that we don't see for 4 to 5 months because it's in transit. So it's a lot of tasting the samples that we're receiving and deciding, does this fit for what we're trying to do? Does it fit on an ethical level? Does it fit on a quality level? And not only on a quality level, but does it fit our blends? And with that, there's a lot of I know a lot of coffee professionals are great at tasting coffee, and that's great. But when we're buying coffees, we need to find coffees that not only taste great, but are going to taste great when paired with other coffees. We put a lot of intentionality in our blends because we're trying to achieve consistency and create a consistent product that you can enjoy from day one to next year. So there's a lot of intentionality in our sourcing just to make sure that we're maintaining consistency in our quality and also improving the quality while keeping that flavor profile, what we're aiming for in that blend. So as far as sourcing goes, though, it's very relational for us. It's something that we want to commit to. We want to be able to buy from a farmer and also be able to give back at the same time of like advice on how we can help them and support them more and really have that conversation of, hey, what do you need? Because a lot of people, a lot of coffee professionals go into it with like, oh, I'm going to make a farmer's life so much better. If they just change this thing on their farm, then they'll produce really high quality coffees. And it's a really naive way of looking at it. I don't know a farmer's barriers. I don't know what they're going through or what their challenges are. So by posing that question of, hey, what can we do for you? What would make your life easier? What would help you in your production? Now with COVID, it's been heartbreaking because it's been a little limited on that front. We haven't been able to go visit farmers and really have those conversations, but our plan is for the future as we make our way out of COVID and the world becomes a safer place for everybody that we're able to do that.
Well, I'm seeing a couple of comments of people who are enjoying their coffee, and I
Yeah, that's awesome. I need to try some.
Yeah, please do. Well earned. And maybe this is more of a question for Deming, but also certainly Sam. But I'm curious, or the people are curious. Like, where's coffee going in the next, handful of years, 5 to 10 years? Like, what's coming up?
Wow, these are great questions. I wish I could predict, but I know that it'll always revolve around, what I've always loved about coffee, which is, when you put a coffee house in the neighborhood, it really congregates the whole community and it becomes the hub of the neighborhood. So that's one thing I love about coffee. But as far as like what products are coming out, one thing that surprised me and has had so much more traction in the coffee world has been the cold brew market has been totally taking off, and I will assume that more methodologies and things around the cold brew market will continue to evolve in that way. And there's been different machines and everything that have come out to try and extract coffee differently. I'm not totally sure that any of those have really taken the traction that they had hoped. Like Clover, I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a really cool idea. Cool way of pulling the oils out of coffee, but at the same time, they really didn't stick around. So I'll assume that the tried and true with espresso is going to stay intact, and the more and more efficiencies we can get with weighing the espresso itself and how we get the bean into the cup, those things will have some fine tuning. But as far as the rest of it, I'm hoping that we get more and more education with the farming techniques, and the focus on organics is really a big part of what we're doing right now, and just for the environment in general. And the coffee belt of the world is really getting hammered by the environment, and there's only certain parts of the world that coffee really can thrive. So these are issues that we're going to have to be dealing with in the years to come, especially with climate change. That belt between the Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer is really where all the coffee is, and it's definitely been taking a beating from the environment. So we're definitely going to be focusing on how we can help sustain the coffee growing world. It's definitely something we're going to be keeping our eye on, something we talk about all the time. But Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Demi, you hit it on the nose. I'm really bad with idioms. I probably messed that one up, but yeah, I agree with everything you said. And just speaking more on the green level, I think it's sustainability on all fronts. So social, economic, environmental sustainability. Like how can we make this better for the future for everybody? Like farming, especially, how can farmers make more money off the coffee they're producing? And with that, how can they increase the quality of their coffee in order to be able to sell their coffees for more? On a very technical level, I believe that with climate change and everything, that processing is the future of coffee for farmers. How coffee is processed, they're experimenting with different fermentation processes where they're fermenting the fruit on the coffee in order to impart some flavors into the coffee that really change the flavor profile as a whole, and creating really incredible coffees that are selling for large amounts. Like the coffee I used for competition, it was a lactic acid fermented coffee that was going for $120 a pound. And that's not to brag like, oh, we got a coffee that was $120 a pound. It was more to showcase, look at the intentionality and the work that the farmer put into this and the risk more than anything to experiment with their coffee. Because that's a huge thing is you go to a farmer and you're like, hey, let's try this fun process. And they're like, well, what if it doesn't work? Then I can't support my family for the year. Like that, I only get one chance each harvesting season. So I think the future is very focused on how can we provide more resources to create more sustainable industry for everybody that's a part of that supply chain.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I'm looking in the Q&A. We do have a number of questions about cold brew. So I wanted to circle back to that briefly. I'm curious, why is it such a big deal, do you guys think?
Demi, do you want to speak to
that? It's very smooth. There's less acidity. That's how it kind of first hit the market. It's like, oh, I have this, kind of like sun tea. It's just like, made over time, and it feels, like this kind of, when it first hit, it was kind of like this cool process that got you a lot of caffeine and a lot of smooth taste because the acidity really isn't as prominent. But I think as a whole, like when you take it to where it's gone now, it's a much easier ingredient to add to things like oat milk drinks and things like that. It's just the format is very favorable. And plus a lot of people, drink coffee for that hit of caffeine, and it does have quite a bit of caffeine, the cold brew, just because those grounds sit in that coffee, in that water for so long. It just really has a lot of time to get all that caffeine extracted. But I think probably just the smoothness is really what's attractive to the masses, I think.
Yeah. I feel like we could
what do you think, Sam?
Say we could do a whole other session on oat milk alone.
Yeah. Oat milk's huge.
Yeah. It's the best. Let's be real.
Yeah. I agree. It's a very neutral medium for the coffee to get carried in. So that's why I love oat milk. I feel like it affects the taste kind of the least out of all the milks. And it's the best for the environment. That and hemp milk are the best environmental milks to choose for sure.
I thought about that. Well, we have time for one more question, and I feel like a lot of what I'm getting are these really excellent macro thoughtful questions. So just for the sake of time, I will end on asking Sam if you can remind us the longest that you should keep freshly roasted beans.
Yeah, I would say, taste it until it doesn't, like what happens is coffee starts getting older, it starts losing a little bit of the flavor potential. So the flavors are just muted a little bit. So I would say 3 weeks is a safe zone for coffee to be fresh. But if it's past the 3 week mark, taste it. And maybe it tastes good still. My competition coffee was 5 weeks soft roast when I brewed it. and it tasted phenomenal. So every coffee is a little different. I would suggest start with the 3-week range, taste it after that point and see where it hits. Those lighter roast coffees definitely, I find that the flavors taste intact a little longer because the bean is a little denser.
And I'm actually going to cheat and sneak in one last question, if we can be quick about it. I wanted to know if you want to share with folks, if someone lives outside of Seattle, far outside Seattle, and wants to hunt down some Caffe Vita, how does one go about doing that?
Yeah, go to our website, caffevita.com. We have all our coffee offerings on there. Also, little secret, but we're launching our new bags next week, which are beautiful, and they have all our coffee information for each bag on them. We'll be launching a new single origin within the next couple of weeks called the Rwanda Sholi from the Sholi Co-op. It's really beautiful coffee. So if you want to try something fun with a little more acidity, you can try that. But we still have our Theo and our French roast that you can also purchase on our website and get that access to that too.
Excellent. Well, Sam and Deming, thank you so much to both of you. And thank you everyone for all these great questions. I know Sam's contact info is in the chat. So feel free to hit her up. And I hope everyone is sufficiently caffeinated to face the rest of the day. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy your
Thank
coffee.
you for having us.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
thank you, Sam and Deming. I really appreciate your time. All
Absolutely.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.